Eugene Madden, the left-handed batsman who threw right, was born in Elm Grove, West Virginia on June 5, 1890. The son of Michael Aloysius Madden, a first-generation Irish-American, and Mary Ann DeFlagger, who was of Dutch-Irish descent. Gene was one of 7 children growing up in the Madden home. The Maddens were devout Catholics and were instrumental in the building of St. Vincent de Paul Church.
Gene attended Cathedral High School in nearby Wheeling, West Virginia, and early on was considered a prominent athlete. Upon completion of high school, Gene signed his first baseball contract in 1908 with the Bradford Drillers. Bradford, which is located in the northwestern part of Pennsylvania, was part of the Class D Interstate League. The Interstate League of 1908 was comprised of 6 teams: Bradford, Olean, Warren, Franklin, Oil City, and Erie. In late April of that same year, an excited, maybe nervous Gene Madden said goodbye to his family and boarded the eastbound train to Bradford. These were exciting times in baseball. Immortals such as Cobb, Wagner, and Mathewson graced the fields. Americans were in love with the game, and boys across America dreamed of making it big.
On May 14, 1908, the Bradford Drillers opened their season at home against the Olean Candidates. The game was preceded by a parade and speeches by city officials. At the age of 17, Gene made his professional baseball debut in front of a modest crowd of 750. Gene trotted out to the shortstop position, the position he would hold throughout the season. Bradford lost the game in the 12th by a score of 4-1. As the season went on, Gene struggled at the plate and in the field. Just when things seemed they couldn't get any worse, they did. Ironically, on his 18th birthday, Gene and all the other players in the league received word that their season was over. After less than a month of official play, the struggling Interstate League was officially down and out. Apparently, the fledgling Ohio and Pennsylvania League had been trying to place a team in Erie and had purchased Erie's field. With Erie playing at an alternate and less desirable location, coupled with poor attendance at the other parks due to an unusually wet spring, the league was broke. Many of the team's players were stranded, owing money for their hotels and having insufficient funds to pay railroad fare. Players had to go out and solicit the purchase of tickets for benefit games. The proceeds would help pay for the players' transportation home.
During the 1908 season, Gene played just 18 games. He had 61 at-bats and just 12 hits, resulting in a 174 batting average. His fielding at shortstop consisted of 18 games with 16 errors, leaving him with a .717 fielding percentage. Gene returned to Elm Grove just a few months after leaving to realize his dream. He was broke and probably in doubt that he was ever meant for the game. When Gene returned to Elm Grove, he found employment with his father at the natural gas company. The next 2 years, Gene would read natural gas meters in and around Wheeling and play semi-pro baseball for the local Wheeling team, the Caseys.
Gene arrived in Dallas in February of 1911. ready to impress the Giants and break into the Texas League. Exhibition games during the later part of February and March were played with the New York Giants. The Giants set up camp in Marlin, Texas. Gene must have been thrilled. What a change from his Bradford days, and certainly an improvement to reading natural gas meters. Gene's first game with Dallas came on March 5, 1911, versus the New York Giants of the National League. Gene managed to get a hit, however suffered 3 errors in the field. He managed to hit well that spring, but made many errors while playing shortstop and third base. Manager Jimmy Maloney had over 30 players on this club, and decisions had to be made. Gene played his last game with Dallas on March 26th. Dallas was defeated by the New York Giants. The Galveston Daily News headline read, "Several wild heaves by Madden this afternoon gave the New York Regulars a 6-3 victory. Madden went hitless and committed 3 costly errors at short." Madden was sent to Mississippi to play for the Class D Hattiesburg Woodpeckers of the Cotton States League. Hattiesburg opened their season on April 6th. The Woodpeckers played a 120-game season, and Gene never missed a start. During that season, Gene had 428 at-bats, 121 hits, scored 82 runs, hit 27 doubles, 6 triples, and 3 home runs, leaving him a respectable .283 batting average.
The 1911 season ended on August 20th, and Hattiesburg finished second in the league behind the Vicksburg Hillbillies. Gene returned to Dallas during March of 1912 to give the Texas League another try. Gene had originally been given a contract by Dallas. However, Jimmy Maloney was now the manager of the Galveston club and was in need of quality players. Gene was transferred to Galveston to play for the Sandcrabs. Galveston was a good ball club, and the team would be playing in its newly constructed Beach Park.
An article appearing in the Galveston Daily News during 1912 reads, "It was the first of the 7th when the redoubtable Christy Mathewson stepped into the pitching box to perform for the last 3 innings. He was greeted by an ovation from grandstand and bleachers as he trotted upon the field and grinned one of his happy grins. The big fellow shot a few fast ones across the plate to Paulette, who took Myers' place behind the bat to receive Mathewson, and then signed that he was ready. Shortstop Madden stepped up to the plate, braced himself, and took a determined swat at the first one Matty served to him, landed solidly, and drove it over second base into center field for a clean single, to the howling delight of the fans in the grandstand." Within a month, Gene would face Christy Mathewson and McGraw's New York Giants, Connie Mack's world champion Philadelphia Athletics, and the Chicago White Sox, managed by Nixie Callahan. Gene would have a solid season playing mainly shortstop. He finished the season with a .246 batting average and 29 stolen bases. The next few years, Gene would make the trip to Texas to play for the Sandcrabs, or Pirates as they were known after 1913. During the off-season, Gene would return to Elm Grove to be with his family and work with his father at the natural gas company. During 1913, Gene would spend most of his games at third base. His average would rise to .254, and his stolen base totals would soar to 59, as Gene was quickly becoming the fleetest base runner in the league. During the 1914 season, Gene was moved to third base by new manager Paul Sentel. His batting average improved to .284, and he would lead the league with 609 at-bats. 1915 was Gene's best year yet. He was moved to the outfield, and his bat came alive. Gene finished the season with a .312 batting average, a boatload of stolen bases, and the best fielding percentage of his career. Many big league clubs noticed this, and on October 22, 1915, the Pittsburgh Pirates offered him a major league contract.
On March 6, 1916, Gene boarded a train with 5 other Pirate teammates for Dawson Springs, Kentucky. They departed at 8:50 p.m. from Pittsburgh, accompanied by many newspapermen. After a brief stop in Louisville, the team arrived in Dawson Springs around 3 o'clock the next day. Many other players arrived earlier that week from other parts of the country. The first night at the hotel was a chilly 28 degrees. A Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reporter described a steady stream of players at the front desk asking for extra bed coverings. On March 8th, the players attended an early morning meeting with new Pirate manager James "Nixie" Callahan, or Cal as many of the newspapers referred to him. Callahan was a pitcher for the Chicago Nationals and later went on to manage the White Sox. He replaced longtime skipper Fred Clark after Clark retired. Cal was well known as a slave driver who had a hot-tempered personality. Shortly after a morning meeting, he took his team on a long hike through the hills. The next few days, Cal had his team performing a series of drills in which his men would swing bats for long periods of time. He felt this would limber up his players and tighten up their stomachs. On March 11th, Callahan finally organized a game between the Pirate regulars and the Yannigans. Yannigans is usually a name given to a team of rookies. Apparently, the word has ties to the Celtic language describing something that is easily beaten. Gene saw his first action batting leadoff for the Yannigans. Madden led off with a double to left field. He would go 3 for 5 that day, scoring a run and committing no errors. The Post-Gazette referred to Madden's hitting as a bright spot in the game. The next day, Callahan started to show concern for his players' eating habits. Many players were enjoying the Southern hospitality a little too much, eating everything in sight. It was not uncommon for players to be spotted filling their pockets after a meal with oranges, nuts, and raisins. Later that day, Madden was inserted in the lineup for the Pirate regulars. He played second base, singled in 2 at-bats, and scored a run. On March 15th, the Pirate players awoke to a snowstorm. This forced Callahan to move camp a few days earlier than expected. The following day, the Pirates arrived in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Like Dawson Springs, Hot Springs was known for its mineral water and many bathhouses. Many major league teams, including the Red Sox, would frequent Hot Springs to boil out. It was thought that the hot mineral water bubbling up out of the ground would not only help sore muscles, it would aid in shedding the excess weight many ball players added to their frames over the winter. During the next week, Gene would play with the Pirate regulars, relieving Honus Wagner at second base. He would join the new recruits on 10-mile hikes over the Ozark Mountains and participate in squash tournaments. Callahan was a big fan of squash, as he felt no other game offered such an intense workout. Bad weather arrived in Hot Springs, and the Whittington Park field would not be playable for several days. When the weather improved, Gene was moved to the Yannigan team and played left field. He did not participate in the game against the world champion Boston Red Sox and would have to show improvement in his remaining games to make the team. The Pirates were given their last day in Hot Springs off to take in some horse racing. On April 1st, the Buccaneers would leave camp to play many teams on their way north. Callahan had arranged contests with Little Rock, Memphis, Louisville, Indianapolis, and Evansville before facing the St. Louis Cardinals on the 12th of April. Unfortunately for Gene, every remaining game was canceled due to poor weather. When the Pirates arrived at Robinson Field in St. Louis, their roster had been reduced to 24 players, including Madden. Gene would not see any action during the 4-game series and was sent to Pittsburgh along with 3 other players before facing Cincinnati. The Pirates would split the series with St. Louis and lose 2 of 3 to the Reds at Redland Field. April 20th, 1916 would mark the home opener for the Pirates. Forbes Field was expecting a capacity crowd, and owner Barney Dreyfuss pulled out all the stops. Callahan was throwing Al Mammox against the Cardinals' right-hander Lee "Specs" Meadows. Specs was given his nickname for obvious reasons. He was one of the few players of the early 20th century to wear glasses in the field. The Cardinals were managed by Miller Huggins. Huggins would later go on to pilot the New York Yankees until his untimely death in 1929. Huggins would manage the Yankees to 6 American League championships and 3 World Series championships. He would later go on to be elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1964. The Cardinals would feature the young Rogers Hornsby at the shortstop position. Hornsby was playing in only his 25th game of his major league career. Madden was not in the Pirate lineup and had yet to see any action during the 1916 season. He was told the night before by Nixie Callahan that he would be released at the conclusion of the home opener to the Syracuse Stars of the New York State League. Madden, who had not seen a live pitch in almost a month, did not expect to play and had no reason to think that Callahan would put him in the lineup. The game got underway at 3 o'clock. The Pittsburgh Post would describe the beginning of the game. Umpire cans Callahan. Ernest R. Quigley, the official who umps behind the batter, did a little stunt that was the turning point in the whole game. It happened in the first inning. 3 Cardinals had been retired, and the Buccos began what looked like a merry-go-round. Johnson lined a base hit to a vacant spot in right field. He pilfered second at such a terrific pace that Snyder's heave to catch him penetrated center field and enabled Doc to scamper to third. Henry Lee Meadows took a long look through his spectacles, and he could see Carey standing at the plate, but he couldn't see the plate. As a result, Maxwell went to first base by the 4-ball route. He stole second. Barney fouled the pellet into the grandstand. Jimmy Callahan, who was coaching at third base, stepped out of the coach's box and walked right up close to Johnston. Quigley waved his right arm in the air and declared Johnston out. Johnston clung to the base, but Callahan made a beeline for the home rubber to interview his umps. Quigley said the manager had touched the runner with his hand. Cal insisted he had done no such thing. Quigley told the pilot he had placed his hand against Johnston's blouse, and the rules plainly prohibit such a performance. Consequently, the base runner was out. Callahan stormed. Captain Wagner ran out and told his umps that the game was automatically in recess at the time of the incident, owing to the fact that a foul had just been batted into the stands. The Cardinals were about the only individuals in the park who considered Quigley correct in his decision. Others, who thought Cal actually had touched Johnston's sleeve, declared that the base running rules were to stand still, in their opinion, from the moment a foul ball had been batted until the new ball was in the hands of the pitcher. Callahan at first was ordered to the bench, where he renewed his expressions of disgust over the decision at third base. Quigley strode to the home dugout, where he informed Mr. Callahan that he had injured the dignity of one of President Tenor's officials. He further notified the manager of the club that he would have to depart from public view. Cal obeyed the command, but while he was beating it for cover, he expressed himself perfectly satisfied that he could name at least one umpire who had read the rule book upside down. The game was resumed under protest. Honus Wagner would take over the manager's spot. The Pirates would fail to score, and Pirate pitcher Al Mamix would give up 3 runs in the top of the second inning. In fact, he would give up 3 triples in a row, the last being hit by future Hall of Famer Rogers Hornsby. 2 outs were quickly recorded in the Pirates' second. Wagner decided to pinch hit Gene Madden for the struggling Mamix. Madden, who would later tell Syracuse reporters that it had been so long since he had been up to the home base that he had to introduce himself to it, grounded a duster to second and was thrown out. 2 Hall of Famers allowed him the opportunity to get his first plate appearance. If Hornsby had not hit the 3rd triple in the bottom of the first, Mamix may have been left in the game. It was also apparent that Gene would not have seen any action if Callahan was still calling the shots. Thankfully, Honus Wagner had made the decision to put Gene in the game, giving him his first big league opportunity. The Pirates would go on to lose the game 5-0. After the game, Madden would say goodbye to his Pirate teammates and hop on a train to Syracuse, New York. Mike O'Neill, the old St. Louis twirler and Syracuse star pilot, had been after Madden for over a month. He had been in close contact with Nixie Callahan. Callahan's release of Madden was conditional. The Pirates reserved the rights to Madden, and he could be recalled when needed. The Stars were currently practicing in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Madden showed up well in practice, and O'Neill was pleased, claiming that Madden would probably bat around 300. He was also very impressed with Madden's speed and base running ability. The Stars played their games at Star Park. Star Park was located on North Salina Street, out near the old salt marshes, bordering the southeastern shore of Onondaga Lake. Syracuse, which was known as the Salt City, was the largest supplier of salt in the country until 1900. The name Salina simply means salt marsh. The park was built in the late 1800s as the home of the former Eastern League Stars. It was refurbished in 1905 and had been the home grounds for the Stars since. On May 4th, just one day before the home opener, pitcher Howard Emke would join the club. Emke came from the Pacific Coast League and had played for Buffalo of the Federal League in 1915. The Stars would open their 1916 season on May 5th against the Troy Trojans. They were rained out for 2 days before the game, and Syracuse sporting man P.J. Dorsey presented manager O'Neill with an umbrella as a gift. They would go on to lose the game 6-2. Madden went 1 for 5 and played right field, the position he would hold for most of the 1916 season. Gene would get off to a poor start. During his first 12 games, he would only record 10 hits, leaving him with a 196 batting average. On May 25th, Gene was moved from the leadoff position to the second slot in the lineup. He would slowly improve his hitting, raising his batting average to .220 after the first 40 games. Many games were rained out, and at one point in the season, the Stars played 19 games in 14 days. On June 24, 1916, former New York Giant pitcher George "Hooks" Wiltse's Albany club beat O'Neill's Stars in a fluke. The Syracuse Herald would describe the scene. The flukiest home run ever made in the State League game in Syracuse enabled George Wiltse's Albany outfit to defeat Mike O'Neill's Twinklers at Star Park yesterday afternoon in 10 innings, 4-3. With the score tied at 3-all in the 10th, Pete Falsey, one of a number of Yale baseball players barred from the Eli Nine this spring because of playing summer baseball last year, and now right fielder for the Albany team, poked a hit in right field in the 10th frame, which became lost in the grass back of first base. And while Gene Madden and Owen Quinn were searching in the tall blades for the horsehide, Falsey scampered around the diamond. Emke was charged with a loss. On July 23rd, the Stars would face the world's champion Boston Red Sox. Syracuse had already played exhibition games against the New York Giants, the Chicago Cubs, and the New York Yankees. They would beat the Red Sox by a score of 5-2. Gene would record a hit off Boston pitcher Ernie Shore. Boston would later go on to win the World Series in 1916. The next day, the Stars would face Harrisburg. Emke would have to thank Madden for saving the game. Emke, pitching in the 13th inning, after fanning 15 batters with the bases full and 2 outs, allowed a blooper over the first baseman. Madden raced in from right field and caught the ball off the top of his shoe. O'Neill stated that Madden had made one of the best catches he'd seen in quite some time at Star Park. The Stars would go on to beat Harrisburg, and Emke would earn his league-leading 19th victory. On July 28th, the Syracuse Herald reported that Emke, the 6'3", 175-pound 22-year-old from Silver Creek, New York, had been sold to the Detroit Tigers. Emke would report at the end of the State League season on September 10th. On August 12th, the Stars would pull into first place over the Binghamton Bingos. A few days later, word was received that Madden would be recalled by the Pirates on September 10th. He had been playing wonderful ball the last month, attributing it to the warm weather. He'd also led the league in stolen bases. O'Neill thought it was likely that he would get in some games with the Pirates in the fall. The Stars' final major league opponent of the 1916 season was the Chicago White Sox. The contest was held on August 15th. Madden would go 1 for 3, while Sox slugger shoeless Joe Jackson would go 3 for 3 and score 2 runs, as the White Sox would go on to thump the Twinklers 16-0. As the season went on, Madden would increase his batting average, make spectacular plays in the field, and steal bases at will. The Stars would remain in first place, and pitcher Howard Emke was unbeatable. Syracuse would finish their 1916 season on September 10th, beating the Utica Utes by a score of 10-1. Madden would go 3 for 4. Gene would finish the 1916 season with a .239 batting average and a league-leading 63 stolen bases. Emke would end his season with a record of 30-6, recording 196 strikeouts. O'Neill's Stars were the New York State League champions. Howard Emke, or Bob as his friends referred to him, would go on to play for the Detroit Tigers. He would remain with Detroit through 1922. Emke's best season was with the Boston Red Sox in 1923. Bob would win 20 games and throw a no-hitter. Emke still holds the American League record for the fewest hits, 1, in 2 consecutive starts. Emke was also pitching for the Red Sox on April 18, 1923 in New York. This was the first ever game played at Yankee Stadium. In the third inning, Emke gave up a 2-run home run, the first home run ever hit in Yankee Stadium, to who else but Babe Ruth. The Yankees would beat the Red Sox by a score of 4-1. Emke was also the surprise Game 1 starter in the 1929 World Series. Emke was now pitching for Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. He'd only started 8 games in the entire 1929 season. Connie Mack figured Emke's sidearm delivery, a mix of slow and controlled pitches, would keep the predominantly right-handed Cubs off balance. Emke was given the final week of the season off so that he could scout the Chicago hitters. Emke would pitch a complete game victory and fan a then World Series record 13 batters. Emke would finish his major league career in 1930 with the Athletics. He would play for 15 seasons, and his career statistics would feature a 166 to 166 win-loss record, a .375 lifetime ERA, and 1,030 strikeouts. Madden was friends with Bob and would remain in contact with him throughout his career. At the conclusion of the 1916 season, Mike O'Neill had arranged a barnstorming tour for his Stars. The first team they would face would be the Pulaski-colored Nine, or the Havana Red Sox. Madden would remain in Syracuse to take in some horse racing. The Syracuse Herald had reported that Madden refused to play against Negroes. Madden reportedly said that if he had to play against Negroes, he would slide high every time. On September 12th, the Pirates announced that Gene would play for Birmingham of the Southern League in 1917. Many of Gene's teammates were pleased to hear that he'd be playing in a stronger league. Gene was never recalled to the Pirates in the fall. Callahan was having a terrible year. The stress must have been too much for him. On one summer day, after losing to Philadelphia, Cal met up with some old friends and went out on a bender. He showed up missing as the series against the New York Giants opened at the Polo Grounds. He was missing for several days. Honus Wagner took over the club. He would briefly manage the team during the 1917 season. On December 17, 1916, O'Neill announced that he had purchased Madden from the Pirates. According to the Herald, for several weeks, the leader of the Twinks has been after Barney Dreyfuss to sell the little red-headed gardener. O'Neill declares that Madden is one of the most valuable men that he has ever run across,
as Gene can play every position except in the box and behind the bat. On February 9th, 1917, Mike O'Neill sent out contracts to his players. After meeting with team owners Frank T. Miller and William Rubin, O'Neill was informed that he would have to make do with $2,000 for player salaries. In previous seasons, the team salary was $2,500. This would mean the average player salary would be around $150. That same day, the Syracuse Herald reported that Mike O'Neill, manager of the Stars, before leaving for his home in Scranton, Pennsylvania today, told us that Gene Madden, the speedy little ball player from West Virginia, who played in right field for the local team last year, does not want to play here in 1917. Gene says that his legs were sore for a long time after the season closed and that it was due to playing on the damp Star Park grounds. Sir Michael, however, believed that he would be able to convince the little ball tosser from West Virginia that he should wear a Syracuse uniform. If Madden returns, he will play second base this coming season, as O'Neill believes that he is one of the greatest little Keystone players he has ever seen. Madden played a few games at second base last season when Evans was shifted to shortstop because Martin was on the injured list. Madden can go either right or left, can cover a world of territory between first and second, and has an accurate whip. O'Neill did convince Gene to return to Syracuse. Madden would later tell reporters, of all the managers he played under, O'Neill knew the most. He was one manager that could get the most there was in a ball tosser. Gene's 1917 season would resemble that of 1916. He got off to a slow start and showed improvement during the warmer months. The Stars were no longer a championship team. Without Emke, they struggled. One bright spot to the 1917 season was Gene's fan base. He was a popular player, and one particular fan adored him. Her name was Genevieve Tormey. Genevieve was the daughter of Christopher and Mary Tormey. Christopher was a mail carrier, and his wife Mary was the first woman deputy in Onondaga County. She had accepted the position in 1917. This was a rare occupation for a woman. In fact, the first woman deputy in the nation was only appointed 5 years earlier. Genevieve had recently finished her studies in music at the School of Fine Arts of Syracuse University. She had accepted a position with Day Brothers Department Stores. Donald Day must have been a gracious fellow to not notice Genevieve's absences on game days at Star Park. Gene would finish the 1917 season with a .232 batting average and 49 stolen bases. The Stars would finish in third place with a record of 64-51. At the close of the season, the New York State League disbanded, and O'Neill announced that he would not return to manage in 1918. Gene would return home to Elm Grove and work as a surveyor for the Highway Board. He had held this position for several winters. As the 1918 season approached, the Syracuse club had joined the International League and was now managed by former Red Sox skipper Patsy Donovan. The Syracuse Herald reported on April 25, 1918, that Madden has quit the game. Today, manager Donovan received a telegram from Gene Madden saying that he had quit baseball for all time and that he would not consider playing again this season. During May of 1918, the new work or fight regulation was enacted. This meant that all able-bodied men of draft age who were not employed in war-related work were subject to the draft. Madden enlisted in the Marines on June 23, 1918. He would receive his training at Parris Island, and when training was concluded, he reported to the Marine Barracks at Quantico, Virginia. Genevieve received word that Gene would be departing for France to join the war. She quickly left Syracuse for Quantico with her friend and fellow co-worker. On September 7, 1918, Genevieve married Gene. The ceremony was held in Quantico at 6:30 a.m.
Father Short had to supply Genevieve with an alarm clock to ensure her arrival. Shortly after the ceremony, Jean had to return to his quarters. Genevieve would return to Syracuse, and Jean was to leave camp for France. An article appearing in the Wheeling Register would describe Jean's regiment. Wheeling Marines, not superstitious. Trio from this city adopts number 13 as their mascot. Private Eugene Madden of Elm Grove is a member of the 13th Marine Regiment, which has just arrived safely in France. In connection with the departure of this regiment, the number 13 played a prominent part. The regiment left Quantico, Virginia on Friday, September 13th, with many of the men using the number 13 as a lucky omen. They shook hands with each other 13 times and sang 13 songs on their departure. One Marine made an effort to take along 13 black cats. Word of their arrival came 13 days after their departure on a date twice 13, September 26th. The 13th is rated as one of the crack units of the Marine Corps and has attained a record of efficiency in marksmanship. Of the entire regiment, consisting of 3,850 officers and enlisted men, 95% hold the right to medals won on the rifle range. Two brothers, Louis and Julian Madden, are also in the service of their country, the former at Camp Meade and the latter at the Students' Army Training School at Washington and Jefferson. Madden arrived at Bordeaux, France in September as part of the American Expeditionary Forces under the command of John J. Blackjack Pershing. Madden would remain in Bordeaux, performing the duties of a military police officer. Already a qualified sharpshooter, Madden would be promoted to the rank of corporal on October 14th. A month later, on November 11, 1918, the German forces would surrender. Madden remained in France until August 9, 1919. He would return home and be honorably discharged from the Marines on August 15th. After a brief return to Elm Grove, Jean would move to Baltimore with his wife, Genevieve. He found employment with the Bethlehem Steel Company at Sparrows Point. Not only was the work plentiful, but Bethlehem had formed what was known as the Bethlehem Steel League. Many big leaguers would play in this league during the war. As part of the work or fight regulation, ball players were working at many of the steel companies and shipyards. They played ball in a competitive league filled with major and minor leaguers. Madden would play for Sparrows Point during the 1920 season. On August 28, 1920, Genevieve would give birth to their first child, Eugene Madden, Jr. Jean would continue to work at the point building ships. It was hard work, and as the spring of 1921 approached, Jean got the itch to play baseball again. On March 9, 1921, Jean signed a contract with the Baltimore Orioles. Baltimore had been an International League powerhouse. Manager Jack Dunn had scouted Jean and was impressed. He was always looking for quality players to fill his lineup. Madden would sign with the Orioles, but under his own terms. If he failed to make the team, Jean would be given his unconditional release, making him a free agent. This was not a common occurrence. Most players were subject to the reserve clause. The reserve clause would allow teams to keep players as property. Owners could release you to any team or league of their choosing. Many players were bound to such terms and were considered property of such teams. It was also around this time that Jean became 2 years younger. Up until now, Jean's age had been correctly reported in the newspapers. However, a now almost 31-year-old Madden was reported to be in his late 20s. From this time forward, newspapers were listing his birth year as 1892. Baltimore papers were even claiming that Jean was only 27. Whatever the case may be, Jean may have claimed a younger age, to attract more ball clubs. The Orioles were training in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Gene would play center field. Baltimore already had a great team who had won the International League title in 1920 and were the favorites to repeat in 1921. It would be very difficult for Gene to find a spot on this team. Gene would make the decision even harder for manager Jack Dunn. He came into camp on fire. Gene hit well, played the field perfectly, and was as speedy as ever. Madden was eventually released. This was not due to his playing ability. Manager Dunn had kept on one of his longtime catchers as a utility player instead of Gene. Gene would bat .355 with the Orioles and commit no errors. Upon his release, Gene was made offers by 3 ball clubs. Gene signed with Roy Mack's fledgling Newark Bears of the International League. He was paid the same salary as he would have made with the Baltimore Orioles. Madden would play his first game with Newark on April 20th, 1921. It was the Bears' home opener. Newark, who was in their first year of the International League, would play their games at Harrison Field, the former home of the Newark Peppers of the now-defunct Federal League. Madden would excel in the opener. He would single in his first at-bat, double the next time up, single in his third trip to the plate, double in his fourth appearance, and slapped a ball down the right field line that was 2 inches fair according to the nearly 10,000 fans in attendance. However, umpire Carpenter, who was in the wrong position to get the call right, called the ball foul. Madden would go 4 for 5, scoring 2 runs in the Bears' 6-3 victory over the Syracuse Stars. During the first month of play, Madden was superb and the toast of Newark. As June approached, Gene would fall into a terrible slump and was eventually benched by Bears manager Jimmy Walsh. Madden would eventually leave the team and join the Syracuse club in August. Syracuse was playing at the new Star Park, located on West Genesee Street near Fairground Boulevard. The old grounds were considered unsafe. The Stars did not compete in the 1919 season due to having no suitable location for games. The Stars were managed by new manager Frank Shaughnessy. Shaughnessy had taken over for the team mid-season after former pilot Tom Madden was let go. Madden would finish out the 1921 season with Syracuse. He would play center field. Gene would play well for Syracuse, helping his team beat Baltimore one afternoon. Madden would get a hit off then Oriole pitcher and future Hall of Famer Lefty Grove. He would record an average of .310 during 252 at-bats with the Stars. The Orioles would go on to win the International League title with a record of 119 wins and 47 losses. They were considered one of the best minor league teams ever assembled. In his final game for Syracuse, Gene would go 2 for 4, recording a single and a double in a lopsided 15-5 loss against the Rochester Colts. Gene would finish the 1921 season playing in 107 games, having 398 at-bats, scoring 63 runs, recording 113 hits, 15 doubles, 4 triples, 3 home runs, and pilfering 22 bases, leaving him with a .284 batting average, the highest average he would record since 1915. After the season concluded, Gene would return to Elm Grove. As the 1922 season approached, Gene was told he had to report to Waterbury, Connecticut, to play for the Brascos of the Class A Eastern League. Newark had still owned the rights to Madden, and he was not pleased. He felt that his contract with Newark had expired, making him a free agent. This was not the case, and the claim by Waterbury was allowed. Shortly thereafter, with his wife Genevieve expecting their second child, Gene announced that he had quit the game. He would make his residence in Elm Grove and manage the local team, the Bowers. The Bowers were a semi-pro club playing in the Ohio Valley. Gene would be player-manager. After almost 13 years in and out of baseball, interrupted only by the Great War, Gene was done. The now 32-year-old father of 2 came to the realization that his career as a ballplayer was behind him. Gene would remain in Elm Grove working for the Highway Board as a surveyor. His family was growing, and by 1927, Gene and Genevieve had 5 children: Jean, Robert, Thomas, Janice, and Eleanor. Jean's mother had passed away in 1923. In 1928, Jean and his family moved back to Syracuse. Jean would work with Genevieve's brother-in-law, Gus Hopkins, at the Leaf Spring and Service Company, which Hopkins had owned. While in Syracuse, Jean and Genevieve had their 6th child, Jerome. Since 1929 was such a fine year for starting a new business, Jean moved roughly 50 miles east of Syracuse to the town of New Hartford. Jean had a desire to be his own man and start his own business. He founded the Utica Spring Service Company in the nearby city of Utica, New York. During 1932, Genevieve would give birth to their 7th and final child, John. Jean's father would pass away in 1934. From then on, Jean would work a full 5.5 days a week at the shop. It was hard work. The steady customers included loggers, and they were unsteady in paying their bills. Genevieve would often have to go out and collect money from these struggling men. It was a depression, and no one could have struggled more than Jean. All 7 of the Madden children made their way to college, owing to the self-sacrifice of Eugene Madden. He began his day boarding the bus at 5:30 a.m., leaving the family Buick for his wife's use. Genevieve would arrive at the shop after Jean's shower and dressed in a shirt and tie and everyday suit. The Maddens would attend St. John the Evangelist Church, and after Sunday Mass, Jean would be found working in the yard. It became a showplace. Sunday dinner would follow, perhaps a nap, followed by a thorough reading of the Times. On April 6, 1949, Jean boarded the bus for work. He would never return home. While working at the shop, Jean suffered a fatal heart attack. Jean's life was much more than just baseball. His greatest accomplishment was not on April 20th, 1916 in Pittsburgh. It was the family he had raised and the legacy he would leave behind.